Every week, we get a load of mail from people in jails and prisons who are striving to learn more about what steps they can take to be extraordinary and compelling during this era of the First Step Act. And I understand how difficult it is, particularly for people who are in prison that don't have access to current news. That's why I'm really grateful for this opportunity to bring information into jails and prisons across America and share experiences about what worked for me while I was going through 26 years in prison, about what I have learned from interviewing tens of thousands of other people who have gone through the system, and about what the government says a person should be doing to prepare for success. Now, for those who don't know about the First Step Act, it is the most relevant prison reform movement, in my view, that has occurred over the past 30 years. And the reason why it's so important is because it opens opportunities for people in federal prison, and this is only for people in federal prison, to work toward an earlier release date through their behavior in prison. Now, that behavior has to be extraordinary and compelling to get the most benefit. But there are other ways that a person can get benefit, and it's important for people to know that at the soonest possible time. Now, when I say it only applies to people in federal prison, there are similar types of legislation in state prisons as well. What's important to realize about the prison system in America is we have 53 different criminal justice systems. Every state, that's 50 states, has its own criminal justice system. The military has its own criminal justice system. The District of Columbia has its own criminal justice system. And then, of course, there's the big one, which is the Federal Bureau of Prisons. That's the one where I had the most experience because I was locked inside of that system for 26 years. My name is Michael Santos. On behalf of our entire team at Prison Professors, we really want to welcome you to our community. Our goal is to strive to help people learn how to teach themselves. But if they don't have access to the information or don't know where to get the information, they're at a real disadvantage. And when people are at a disadvantage, they become more vulnerable to the messages that they hear inside of jails and prisons. It's my goal to try and help people reach their highest potential inside, because I was inspired by people who helped me reach my highest potential while I was incarcerated for 9,500 days. So what we're going to do today is we're going to turn to some memorandums that came out from the Department of Justice earlier this year. So I'm going to turn down here to my computer screen and switch the window and go to this section here that was published by the Department of Justice. And this was published on January 13th, 2022. So just about, 3 months ago? This is February, March, April. Yeah, just a little under less than 3 months ago. But a lot of people in prison don't really understand what the implications are. And I know this because I keep getting these letters from people in prison who are asking me to provide them with more insight. So I hope that this article will help. I'll read it for those who can't read it because the screen may be too small on their device in prison, but also for people who may be listening to this episode on the Prison Professors podcast. Now it says that the Justice Department announces a new rule implementing federal time credits program established by the First Step Act. So again, this is the most powerful legislation that has occurred certainly since I went into the prison system back in 1987. So it says, today, the Department of Justice announced that a new rule has been submitted to the Federal Register implementing the time credits program required by the First Step Act for persons incarcerated in federal facilities who committed nonviolent offenses. As part of the implementation process, the Federal Bureau of Prisons has begun transferring eligible inmates out of the BOP facilities and into either a supervised release program or into the residential reentry centers or home confinement. So those are big deals. It doesn't necessarily mean that a person is going to be able to satisfy the sentence in its entirety early, but what it does mean is that the person may be able to transfer to serve a significant portion of that sentence on home confinement through this concept known as earned time credits, or just time credits program. That's fundamentally different from good time. So I've written a lot about that. That's available on the Prison Professors. Today we're going to try to stay focused on the First Step Act itself. So the First Step Act is a critical piece of bipartisan legislation, promised a path to an early return home for eligible incarcerated people who invest their time and energy into programs that reduce recidivism. That's what the Attorney General Merrick Garland said. Today, the Department of Justice is doing its part to honor this promise and is pleased to implement this important program. The First Step Act of 2018 provides eligible inmates the opportunity to earn 10 to 15 days of time credits for every 30 days of successful participation in evidence-based recidivism reduction programs and productive activities. The earned credits can be applied toward earlier placement in pre-release custody, such as RRCs, that's a residential reentry center, and home confinement. In addition, at the BOP director's discretion, up to 12 months of credit can be applied towards supervised release. This is a big deal. I changed that word inmates to people. People are eligible to earn time credits retroactively back to December 21st, 2018. That's the date the First Step Act was enacted, subject to the BOP's determination of eligibility. So implementation will occur on a rolling basis, beginning with immediate releases for inmates whose time credits earned exceeded their days remaining to serve, or are less than 12 months from release, and have a supervised release term. Some of these transfers have already begun, and many more will take place in the weeks and months ahead as the BOP calculates and applies time credits for eligible incarcerated individuals. The final rule will be published by the Federal Register in the coming weeks and take immediate effect. This rule, as it was submitted to the Federal Register, can be viewed here, and then there's a link to it right there. Now it says, please note that the text of the First Step Act time credits final rule as signed by the Director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons, but the official version of the final rule will be as it is published in the Federal Register. So that's the full text that comes from this link right here under Justice News. The Department of Justice published that information on Thursday, January 13th, 2022, so less than 3 months ago. What's important, I think, for people to realize is that there is still a lot of, a lot of implementation being spread out through the Bureau of Prisons right now. This, again, is the most significant piece of prison reform legislation that has taken place in the past 30 years. There has always been a mechanism for what's called compassionate release in the system, as I spoke about it in an earlier video. But in the past, the Bureau of Prisons did not honor that rule. In fact, during the entire time that I was incarcerated, and this rule was known as Rule 4205G. In fact, let's see if we can find it by going back to the Chrome tab and go to Rule 4205G in the Bureau of Prisons and see what it says, see if I can find something there. And here it is right here. This was compassionate release and sentencing. As you can see here from this document, that was in effect, well, actually they were writing about it in 2019, but this rule, Title 18, 3582 and 42505G, was in effect the entire time of my incarceration. And I started my prison term in 1987. But at that time, the policy of the Bureau of Prisons was to completely disregard that rule. A person could seek compassionate release, but in practical effect, the Bureau of Prisons would not grant it. So with the First Step Act, they didn't only implement earned time credits, or just time credits. Is it called time credits? Let me turn back and see what it was called again. The technical term is, just time credits. They also implemented this concept of compassionate release. And because I think that's so important, I'm going to create a video and publish the exact document that describes the First Step Act. I'm going to skip over the parts that really don't apply to people in prison, such as the parts that apply to funding for jails and prisons and colleges and evidence-based information. But I'm going to really just search for the salient parts of that act and I'm going to read it into the next video, and hopefully one of the people that work with our team will review the video and kind of summarize it, which you'll be able to get in the show notes or on the post that we publish at our website at prisonprofessors.com. Now, my name is Michael Santos, and I served 26 years in prison from August the 11th, 1987 until August the 12th, 2013. And during that term, I learned a great deal. Mostly, I learned that an individual really has to invest in himself or herself to position himself for the best possible outcome. So if you're watching this video from inside of a jail or a prison, whether you're a state prisoner, whether you're in jail, whether you're in federal prison, it's my hope that you really think about these same concepts, because a person never knows what type of legislation is going to come forward later. But to the extent that an individual really builds a record of being extraordinary and compelling, and those are key phrases, because those are the two words that judges must consider if they're going to grant compassionate release. So there are objective programs that a person can participate in to get time credit, and that time credit is significant. But in addition to the time credit, an individual under the First Step Act now has the ability to request both the prison system and a judge for compassionate release. That didn't exist before. That's why I consider the First Step Act some of the most relevant prison reform legislation in the past 30 years. But if people don't know about it, they're still going to be vulnerable to bad decisions or bad influences that they receive throughout the prison system, where people are frequently talking about the best way to serve time is to forget about the world outside and focus on your time in here. My experience was that it was always best to focus on yourself, to develop skills, to develop tools, to develop tactics, to develop resources that will help you become an exceptional advocate for yourself. Now, it's easy for other people to be negative and to become a victim of their environment, but if you want to empower yourself, you are far better off to learn skills and strategies that will help you qualify for legislation when it becomes available. The First Step Act is available to everybody, but there are certain exclusions for violent offenders or for people convicted of violent offenses. And the individual has to be thinking, okay, what steps can I take to differentiate myself? Seth Godin, I think I may have said this in an earlier video, but Seth Godin, a rather well-known author who writes a lot about marketing, uses this analogy of the purple cow. He says that when you're driving down the road, you may see quite a few cows in a pasture, but nobody's going to really look at them because they're used to seeing those cows. But if somebody sees a purple cow in the pasture, they're going to pay attention. My recommendation in this era of the First Step Act is to be the purple cow. Be extraordinary and compelling. Develop a body of work and a record that shows that you are worthy of mercy, worthy of compassionate release. That will only happen if you think strategically about what steps can I take. And of course, we feature quite a few people on the Prison Professors program of people who have been successful in navigating their way to an early release. That's what we hope will happen for you. And if you just work hard on yourself, work hard on your liberty, you will not only restore hope, you will build confidence, and you will build a record that will probably advance your candidacy for the outcome that you want. It may not get you out tomorrow. Sometimes it takes a long time of weeks and turning into months, and months turning into years, and even years turning into decades for some people. But I can assure you, as somebody who's walked that path, it's worth it. Since I've come home from prison, I've been able to build my career and to do what I want to do, which is try to help people going into the system understand how they can sow seeds for a better outcome. My name is Michael Santos, and on behalf of our entire team at Prison Professors, I want to thank you for being a part of our community. I do hope that you will subscribe to the channel, whether you're on iTunes or YouTube or getting it anywhere else. But every day, I encourage you to work toward the best possible outcome, particularly during this era of the First Step Act. Thanks so much for being a part of our community.